relevant reading. I'm gonna, since it's
Uh-huh.
a very short excerpt, I will ask you to read it in full, and then
Uh-huh.
afterwards provide setting, key concepts, any lessons learned. Did you feel it like it was easier because it was something more culture relevant and maybe something you've already had exposure to? But those are some questions
Uh,
to anticipate while you're reading. So yeah,
mm-hmm.
the second expert, you can get started in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Yep. Shen of Taishan was wealthy, but a brutal and inhuman man who treated his fellow citizens shamefully, and especially exhibited his bad character in damaging their instruments and machines, or any utensils which were used by workers in tilling the soil, manufacturing, fishing, hunting, and other occupations of life. Once when he was building a guest hall in his house, he hired Liu of a neighboring village, well known as a skilled sculptor, to carve some figures on pillars and beams. But when the artist had finished his work, Shen refused to pay him the stipulated sum. The sculptor remonstrated, and the dispute was finally settled by a lawsuit against Shen, who for this reason began to scheme for revenge. Sometime later, the Buddhist priests in a southern metropolis intended to have the status of 500 arhats carved for their temple, and having heard of Liu's fame, invited him to compete for the task. Shen thought his opportunity had come, so he hired a man to join Liu's party. While on the way, this valiant followed the instructions of Shen, spoiled the instruments of the sculptor, and absconded without being discovered. While Liu on his arrival could use none of his tools, he was unable to compete with native sculptors, whereby he lost his employment and became quite destitute. Since Shen continued in his evil practices, his daughter-in-law warned him that unless he reformed, heaven would certainly visit the family with misfortune. But Shen resented her words and drove her from his home, charging her with impudence and disobedience. Before she was more than a mile or so away from the house, there came a sudden terrific outburst of thunder and lightning, and she hid herself in the woods nearby. Then she saw a scarlet dragon come out of the black clouds and enter Shen's residence. The building was completely wrecked, everything inside destroyed, and every living thing instantly killed. No member of the family escaped, except the daughter-in-law, who had been driven out. Heaven favored her, and she lived in a long and prosperous life.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So that was the full reading. What do you feel like?
Uh-huh.
What was it? Can you tell me the setting of the story? What is something you learned and something
Uh-huh.
do you feel like this reading was overall easier? Yes, it was shorter, but do you feel like it was easier to interpret?
I definitely feel like so because I think the spirit, like main the main argument that the writer wants to convey to reader, I think is more easy to get because it's more linked to my culture.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. So what was the context of the story, just so I could have some concrete
Uh,
demonstrations of comprehension?
so I think for this, it's like a story used to educate that if you did bad things, that there will definitely be a payback from the heaven or like from a godly figure that punish your bad behaviors. So like it's intended, I think, mostly to educate young people or like people of all age that you have to keep track of your behavior. You have to stay like not nice, but like stay uh like not do evil behaviors. Otherwise, there will be a payoff or like a punishment.
Thank you so much for doing this today. I appreciate all that you do. Um,
You're welcome.
this was the conclusion and verbal and auditory assessment of reading and
Mm,
literature.